The moral dilemma of Light's mission is the through line that runs through the entire series. Was Light misguided in trying to change the world the way he did? Was L, and later were Nier and Mello, misguided in trying to stop him? Is having a Death Note at all something that could ever be justified, no matter what the context is? The series doesn't really give us any answers. It isn't interested in deciding for us. It tells us a story, and leaves us to interpret it however we want. That's why Death Note is still a series I can go back to 15 years later, and still enjoy it just as much as I did when I was a little robot boy watching Adult Swim. I think popular opinion over the years has landed on the side of most people not being okay with Light or his actions. But what if it's not that obvious? What if Light Yagami was not the hero we've been okay with, but he was the one we needed? My name is Zero, this is Kato, and today let's break down how Light was always the hero of Death Note. Let's talk about the morality of using a Death Note to solve problems. Light killed criminals because he believed that the fear of being killed would eventually reduce crime all on its own. He gave heart attacks to the most violent criminals, preferring to use things like disease or accidental deaths for less violent offenders. In this scenario, Light essentially acts like a global deterrent for all of humanity. He even ends up somewhat successful. He points out that he reduced crimes by a whopping 70%. Light was in the end just one man writing things in a notebook. Even if he killed tens of thousands of criminals, he ended up saving many, many more lives than he ever took. Does that justify what he did or how he did it? Light acted as a necessary evil for the world. The people trying to stop him understand the concept just as well. Light's father, Soichiro, is supposed to be the moral pillar for most of the story. When it came time to investigate his family, he didn't hesitate to put cameras in his bathrooms despite his wife and daughter. It was a necessary evil to prove his family innocent. Light was raised by his father and wanted to become a detective because of his father. He never actually confronted him about this power. Who's to say that Light couldn't have convinced his father that what he did was necessary if he actually talked to him about it? Soichiro says that the power to kill people is a cursed power, and he doesn't even know just how cursed the Death Note really is. Before he got the Death Note, Light truly believed that humanity was just spiraling down into oblivion. Getting the Death Note just gave him a way to do something about it. Maybe the act of killing was inherently wrong, but can we really say that the world wasn't better off for Light? The members of the task force and SPK oppose Kira's effects, but most of the people who were trying to catch Light, from L to Mello, just wanted to see him convicted for their own reasons. When that was said and done, none of them had any plan on what to do when the crime rate eventually skyrocketed again. Their best idea was to pretend Kira was still out there. Their fun little game was over. L, for instance, was famous for always solving cases that actually interested him. Why would he care about your everyday murder? If Light killing criminals saved many more people, then wouldn't stopping Light just mean killing those people yourself? And even if the power to kill people is inherently wrong, it wasn't like Light could go back. It's easy to forget, but the first two people Light ever killed were experiments. Heck, he thought he was playing into a stupid prank. He was more surprised than anyone else that the Death Note actually worked, and by that point it was already too late. Light was already a killer. He chose to then go on to do something with that curse. If someone had to have this kind of power, then I'd argue it might as well have been someone a lot like Light Yagami. Here's a fun little thought experiment. In the place of Light, just how many people would choose to try out this fun little prank on people that didn't deserve it? How many people would write the names of someone that was rude to them one time, or someone they had a bad history with? Not to actually kill them, but just to vent with a silly joke. Even when Light thought it was a prank, he still only did it with the people he'd actually be comfortable with killing. That alone would make him far more moral than most people. Even in the story, Light is presented as the most moral person who ever used the weapon, using it in the most noble way it could be used. L wanted to use the Death Note to test the 13-day rule, ironically using Kira's methods to beat Kira. Mello used the Death Note to kill most of Nier's staff to settle a grudge. These reasons are either at best questionable or downright evil. It's notable that both Nier and Soichiro Yagami, the aforementioned moral pillar of the story, both refused to use the Death Note at all. Nier even has a speech about how easy it would be for his organization to just assassinate Light Yagami and Taro Mikami, but then doesn't do it. Certain characters do reject the power to kill, but that kinda supports the idea that there's no more moral way to use that power than how Kira is using it, in principle. The principle of killing the right people. Of course, we can criticize how he does use it in practice. One problem people often point out is that Light eventually uses the Death Note to kill innocent people. He kills the FBI agents, gets L killed, and pretty much killed Lindell Taylor just for mocking him, and he only happened to be a criminal. It's a decent argument, but hardly bulletproof. Light did kill relatively innocent people, but they were only people who were trying to stop or oppose him. If Light is a necessary evil, if he's the reason millions of people are still alive, then why shouldn't he? Light says that the people who are trying to oppose him are truly evil, and most people ignore it because it's Light's ego talking. But is he wrong? Anyone stopping him isn't trying to make things right. They aren't trying to stop the downward spiral that Light saw. All they're trying to do is maintain the status quo. They assume the downward spiral isn't happening. But what if it really is? Sure, Light might have killed Lindell Taylor out of pride, but they ignore that Light wasn't interested in him solely because he said mean things. To Light, this was L, a world-famous detective that had solved every important case ever and was now about to investigate his crimes. His ego being attacked might have pushed him over the edge to action, but I don't think Light would have killed him if it was just any random person. We hear about other people talking smack about Kira on TV, but we don't hear about most of them dying, and none at Light's hands. Light has only ever killed people who were either criminals or were trying to stop him. People talk like Light randomly killed people for cutting him off in traffic, when it's always been more nuanced than that. Take for instance, when he considered killing Sayu. This would have been a case of him actually killing the kind of person his ideal world is supposed to protect, as well as someone who should have a close personal connection to him. In the end, he doesn't do it, and for good reason. But this moment suggests that his willingness to kill people is just him offering them up as sacrifices to a better world. Sometimes he enjoys making the sacrifice, and sometimes he does it with hesitation. Now, I still don't personally agree with Light just killing criminals broadcast on the news or online. After all, wrongful convictions are a thing, and Light wasn't investigating literally every single person whose name he wrote in the Death Note. It does seem like he looked into a lot of the cases of the people he punished, but we also know that he punished some people right after their crimes were made public. There's also the times when Kira's killings were being performed by Higuchi, Misa, or Mikami. All of which means, numerically speaking, Kira definitely has some innocent blood on his hands. Still, the results do speak for themselves. Light genuinely made the world a far safer place than it was before. Essentially, Light did create a better world, but this better world wasn't real. There's less crime, not because people are better, but because they're afraid. A world created through means like this has no value. It's something asked not only in Death Note, but in many similar shows like Code Geass. I say this is idealistic because while it's true, it's not really practical. It's the same problem everyone trying to stop Light has. Sure, they might stop Kira, but all that really does is break the dam Light was holding shut all by himself. What is the alternative? Even in the real world, the biggest thing keeping us from going to war is nuclear weapons, another global deterrent. Light is exactly that in the world of Death Note. Honestly, given the kind of power that Light has, it's actually amazing that he's been so, well, reserved with it. Even after the time skip, we know that Light pretty much only cares about two things. He cares about killing criminals and wants to prevent authorities from trying to investigate him or hide criminals from him. With the power he has, it would be trivially easy for him to say, swing an election, stop or cause a war, and do pretty much anything. It's somewhat implied Light has done stuff like this. If Light had wanted to, he could have taken far more advantage, and it wasn't like they could have stopped him any sooner. Given that, it just speaks to Light's patience and foresight that he only did what he did. A few months after that time skip, Kira is basically endorsed by the President of the United States. People are starting to accept him as part of the world, and some see him as the arbiter of morality. There was the moment when Mikami told the media that he was going to start killing people who don't contribute to society enough, and Light said it was too early for Kira to start saying stuff like that. Mikami probably just said that because he was starting to have trouble hitting his self-imposed one-page-a-day quota. So we don't really know how much Light planned to speak to the world, or if he planned to be more of a silent god, but it's interesting to imagine that he might just stay in basically the same role for the rest of his life. One thing I feel often gets overlooked is that people only focus on the criminals he's killed, the crime rates he's reduced. In the world of Death Note, where you can drop dead at pretty much any time, would wars exist? In the show, we learn that even war has been reduced by Kira's influence. What leader would lead his country into a war knowing that he can be killed even if he's inside a bunker 100 feet under the earth? People in the fandom have done the math, and Light saves hundreds of thousands of lives every year just by reducing the crime rate. I'd argue that Light has actually indirectly saved the lives of millions, not just hundreds of thousands. On that kind of scale, Light has probably saved more people than most everyone who's ever existed. Compared to all of that, and with all he's sacrificed, it's hard to see Light as a villain. You might still disagree with him, you might think he's an anti-hero instead, but Light's results do speak for themselves. With this lens, Light has objectively been a force for good in the world, and defeating him did just make the world worse, not better. But maybe you think things were just getting better before they got worse. We can never really know. Light is smart, I'm sure he had plans for what to do after his death. I doubt he only wanted to make the world more peaceful for a few decades before letting it spiral back to whatever it was before. If I had to guess, he would have eventually trained up an heir, making sure they had all the values he himself had. Then he'd pass along his powers. I will become the god of the new world. The phrase sounds resolute. There's almost resignation in how he says this. Light might have wanted to be a god, but it wasn't strictly for his own good. He wanted to take on the worst parts of being a deity, judging people. He might have even relished in the people who worshipped him, but is that really such a bad price for saving millions of lives? Light isn't perfect, and we all know he still got plenty of things wrong, but he would have had to mess up spectacularly to undo all of the good he ended up doing. That's why, love him or hate him, Light was the hero in Death Note. On this channel, we try to present more interesting and nuanced perspectives of the shows that we love, and often perspectives that we feel are underrepresented in the community. And I think back to that moment in the finale, when Light has been completely exposed and blatantly caught in a trap. He tries to start a dialogue, thinking he can rhetorically trick the others into releasing him as a final resort. His words give them pause as they start to contemplate the actual ramifications of Kira's actions in their world, and what it would mean to cut that off instantly. They've all come so far for this purpose, but he starts to feel as though he can sway them. But Nier shuts him down by simply pointing out that they don't let murderers go free. The simple and moral view rejects Kira's merits and ends the conversation right there. Now, tactically speaking, this is a ploy on Light's part, and Nier sees through it, to the point that Light thinks he just has to kill Nier. But I think it's true that when you try to defend Kira's actions, the discussion becomes so much more nuanced than when you admonish them. It makes sense for Nier to put a stop to the conversation, but that doesn't mean we as Death Note fans should. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe, share this video with someone who will like it, and turn on that notification bell. Before I go, I just want to give an extra special shout out to all of the lovely patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT. We're super active in our patron Discord server, occasionally throwing some late night anime and movie watch parties. So if that's something you're interested in, pledge just $1 to get an invite. You can also follow us on Twitter at KatoBeyond. Links to everything will be in the description. Again, my name is Zero, this is Kato, and thank you all for listening to my dumb rants. Subscribe for more.